Evergreen Heart. By Oprian. Chapter 12. Talks and Troubles. Celestia glared at me with undisguised anger, her eyes narrowed. I swear being on the receiving end of that glare was the most intimidating thing ever. Seriously, she made the dragon look like a pushover. Luna, what were you thinking setting this creature free? I figured now would be as good a time as any to speak up. I stepped forward before Luna could form a reply. The guards on either side of us tensed up, ready to intervene if I made any hostile moves. Do not be angry with her, Princess Celestia. Your sister was merely trying to do what was right in her eyes. Even if that included vaporizing me. But I left that part unspoken. No need to get my favorite princess in trouble for acting hastily and without having all the facts. Like her sister, Celestia seemed momentarily taken aback by my ability to speak. You had best explain yourself, for you stand accused of a great many wrongs, creature. She sounded more intrigued than angry now, but her eyes still held a hard edge to them. Look, can we stop with the creature already? I know I look rather exotic, but I have a name. So if you must address me, then call me Aaron. One of her personal guards glared at me. Speak to the princess with respect, beast. I sighed mentally. Another prick, just my luck. Gotta stay diplomatic though, don't wanna get vaporized by the sun diarch. Apologies, princess. I said with as much respect as I could muster, despite my fraying temper. I was never a fan of stuck-up guards, especially the overzealous kind, or anyone in an authority position throwing their weight around just because they could. Well then, Aaron, would you be so kind as to explain who and what you are, where you came from, and why you felt it necessary to attack my little ponies? I took a moment to gather my thoughts before I answered her. That is a long and complicated story, princess, and I don't exactly have all the answers to that myself. Then explain as best you can. Let's start simple. Who and what are you? I have lived a long time, and I have never seen the likes of you before. That is one of the questions I don't have all the answers to. I wasn't always like this, I said while pointing at myself. Up till about 2 weeks ago I was a being of flesh and blood like yourself. She raised an eyebrow. Truly? Then how did you end up like this? I don't exactly know, though it likely involved a great deal of magic. That and my death. Her eyes widened a fraction. I must have misheard you. Did you say you died? I found myself fidgeting involuntarily as I remembered the Timberwolf's teeth sinking into my flesh. Yes. I don't know how, but I was somehow taken from my home, and transported to the depths of the ever-free forest. Some of the nobles let out gasps or panicky squeaks at the mention of the forest. I had scarcely gotten my bearings before I was chased by timber wolves. More gasps rose around me. They chased me for I don't know how long until I could flee no more, and then they ate me, alive. I caught a glimpse of a noble tossing his cookies all over a guard's hooves. The majority of those in attendance had looks of horror and disgust plastered all over their faces. Even Luna and Celestia looked a little green around the muzzle. I remember pain and the smell of my own blood. I remember feeling the life slipping out of me, then a burst of light, and when I could finally see again, I waved a hand at myself. This. I looked back at Celestia, her gaze had softened considerably. Luna looked at me with an expression bordering on pity. Thou said it happened a fortnight ago. That was the night we returned. Yes, Princess Luna. I remember seeing the moon for the first time. I saw the silhouette of the mare in the moon, which made me realize I was in Equestria, since our moon doesn't have a unicorn's head depicted on it. What do you mean our moon? Celestia interrupted me, there is only one moon that orbits Equus. Well, here comes the first bombshell, because I'm not originally from Equus, Princess Celestia. I'm from a planet called Earth. Which, as far as I know, isn't even in this dimension. All around the room there was an eruption of chatter and angry shouts. He lies! Shouted one pony. There is no such thing as other dimensions, cried another. He's trying to trick the princess with some elaborate fantasy to avoid punishment, yelled a third. Lies. Fabrications. Monster. Send it to the moon. Beast. Charlatan. To the dungeons with it. Lock it in Tartarus. The uproar grew louder until Celestia slammed a hoof down with a bang. Enough. She glared at the assembled nobles before looking back to me. Your claim is quite fantastical, Aaron. But not per definition impossible. It is something we can get to the bottom of later, however. What I want to know right now is why you attacked Ponyville. What did my little ponies do for you to feel it necessary to try and destroy them? That was not me. I said vehemently, I was not the one in control when that happened. The last thing I ever wanted was to hurt any pony. Then why? Please tell us what happened. I stared at my own hand for a long moment before I looked back at Celestia and continued. I had been staying in the Everfree forest with Zekora, she's a zebra herbalist who lives there. I had gone back into the deep parts of the forest to give the remains of my old body a proper burial. I had hoped it would give me some closure. When I was done and tried to make my way back, I got lost. I ended up taking shelter from the rain in a cavern, but it turned out the cave already had an owner. A dragon who didn't appreciate interlopers. Celestia looked as if she just bit the inside of her cheek. I guess dragons were unpleasant to deal with, even for her. I was feeling miserable and prickly, and when the dragon told me to get the buck out of his home, I ended up insulting him. Then he tried to kill me. Both princesses scowled at that while I kept talking. I felt it best to just get it over with. For the second time in less than a week I was staring into the jaws of death. He smacked me around like a rag doll, then tried to finish the job by slowly crushing the life out of me. Last time I was on death's door I gave up, this time something in me snapped. I let my rage boil over, and in doing so I set something terrible loose. I don't exactly understand it all, but from what I remember of it and what Zekora told me is that one of the timberwolves that ate me took up residence in my mind, or something to that effect. And when I lost my cool it took the reins and went on a rampage. It was the beast that raised Ponyville, not me. Once more the crowd was breaking into angry mutterings, calling me a liar and deceiver. Accusing me of making up excuses for my crimes. Celestia cut them off with a furious glare. One more outburst and I will have the throne room cleared. She said with a stern voice. Wait, what of the dragon that attacked thee? Luna asked. I hesitated before answering. Dead. In my anger, I killed it, then the beast took over and devoured it. Thou killed an adult drake? By thyself. Luna said with disbelief and a hint of respect. Celestia on the other hand scowled at me once again. Surely you did not need to kill another sentient creature, she said coolly. What did you expect me to do, Celestia? I asked. I had died once already, I had no desire to repeat the experience. It was him or me, I chose me, and were I in that situation again I would do it again. That dragon was a grade A bastard, and if you ask me the world is better off without his scaly ass in it. Who are you to decide that? She asked me with a great deal of disappointment in her voice. What gives you the right to decide who gets to live and who gets to die? I'm a person who was trying to stay alive in a desperate situation. What if it had been a pony? If a pony killed a dragon, would you still be disappointed or just happy that he or she survived the encounter? A pony would never take a life like that. Bullshit! I yelled, causing the crowd to gasp at my audacity. Any living being who finds itself in a life or death situation will choose life over death no matter the cost. It's called survival instinct. Even you would do the same if you were desperate enough and pushed into a corner. If you claim otherwise, then you are a lying hypocrite. And no, sacrificing oneself for the greater good does not count. There is a difference. A guard pointed a spear at me with narrowed eyes, his lips curled into a sneer. It was that same stuck-up asshat from before. Hold your disrespectful tongue, you filthy monster. I acted without thinking. I yanked the spear from his grasp before he could blink and snapped it in half before tossing it back at his hooves. I swear, the next pony to point a weapon at me will have it shoved sideways up his plot hole. Celestia glared at me disapprovingly but took no action since I didn't actually hurt anyone. She did raise a hoof to forestall her guards from taking any other actions. Several of them had seemed ready to pounce. Luna seemed to be stifling a snicker. I bet you 10 bits she hasn't had the warmest of welcomes herself if what I saw earlier is any indication, so me laying into the guards was probably feeling a bit cathartic to her. Celestia let out a tired sigh. While I reluctantly concede your point, I cannot approve of taking a life so callously. Taking the life of any creature should always be the very last resort in any situation. Luna looked as if she wanted to speak up, but in the end she stayed silent. I guess whatever she wanted to say about that wasn't meant for the ears of the crowd. Look, princess, I'm not normally a violent person. I don't want to hurt any pony, or any other creature for that matter. Yes, I killed a dragon, but that was mainly in self-defense and blind anger. I won't claim innocence there. But I'm not some rampaging killer. Heck, I rescued 3 little fillies from certain death while I stayed over at my friend Zekora's place. She didn't show it, but I could tell she was surprised by that because even though she could hide her physical reaction, her magical aura flickered as if hit by a sudden gust of wind. Is there any pony who can confirm that? You can ask them yourself if you like. They live in Ponyville. They are related to Twilight Sparkle's friends Applejack and Rarity. Celestia's horn lit up and quill and parchment rose from behind her throne. Which made me wonder what other stuff she keeps back there. 5 bits say she has a hidden stash of cake somewhere in this room. Well, if you believe popular headcanon that she's a complete cake addict, but I digress again. She quickly penned a letter which she vanished with a spell. No doubt she was contacting Twilight to confirm my story. So, what happens now? I asked. That depends on your intentions, Aaron. I took a moment before I answered her. If you fear I will try to conquer Equestria or something equally ridiculous, you can rest easy. I harbor no ambitions of conquest. I'm not some cheesy villain of the week. That statement got me a slight chuckle, though I couldn't tell who was doing so. I never asked to be like this. I waved a hand at myself again. A thing that nobody understands. I never asked for these powers. Heck, it scares the life right out of me when I think about all the things I'm now capable of. I don't even know what exactly I am capable of. I discover new abilities almost every day. I let out a deep mental sigh, my form wilting just a bit. I just want to, heck, I don't know what I want. I've barely had a moment to think since I arrived in this world. It's been just one shock after another. I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go, I don't know. I lapsed into silence. The crowd was murmuring all around us, but Celestia herself was sitting silently gazing at me. I had no idea what went through her mind, but that almost motherly gaze of hers gave me a faint flicker of hope that perhaps I would get out of this intact after all. Finally she rose to address the crowd. The court is now closed. Every pony go home. Several nobles raised their voice in protest, but she held up a hoof to silence them. If you have any concerns or issues, you can bring them up in tomorrow's court at noon. Dismissed, she then stepped down from the dais and quietly addressed me, walk with me. As the last of the nobility of Canterlot vacated the throne room, I followed the princess out through a pair of side doors with several guards plus Luna following in our wake. If I may ask, where are we going? To my private study. Celestia replied, I believe you spoke truthfully, but I still wish to know more about you. I figured we could speak more easily in a more relaxed setting. And away from gossiping prying nobles, I presume. She tittered, quite so, while we love our little ponies dearly, they can be a bit excitable. A nuisance thou means. Luna muttered quietly from just behind us. Celestia was about to rebuke Luna for her remark, but I interjected. Speaking of nuisances, the guards you assigned as escort for your sister were treating her quite disrespectfully. Celestia raised an eyebrow at me. Oh. Indeed, they treated her like she was some inept little foal at best, or a bothersome nuisance at worst. Hardly how I would expect them to treat a returned member of the royal family. Celestia looked at Luna. Is this true, sister? 'Tis nothing worth mentioning, Tia. No, dear sister, it is worth mentioning. And I will have words with them later. 'Tis nothing less than what we deserve, or expected. Luna said quietly. Please don't do that, princess. I said. Do what? Luna asked, looking confused. Talk as if you deserve naught but hate and ridicule. But we do, we have committed great wrongs to our little ponies, wrongs we must atone for. Don't you think being locked away in the moon for 1,000 years is penance enough? What more do you want, a public flogging? I jumped forward and struck a pose as if reading from a scroll like a town crier of old. Hear ye, gather ye round one and all and feast thine eyes upon yon stage as today we spank the royal flank for crimes against ponies from long ago, I proclaimed loudly in my best yet olden times voice. Had she been drinking, I'm sure she would have done a spit take, judging by the face she made. She was sputtering indignantly, trying to form a coherent sentence. Behind Luna the pair of guards that had been escorting us were desperately looking everywhere but in her direction lest they stare at her flanks, no doubt imagining the scenario I just painted in their minds. Celestia, for her part, looked like she swallowed a bug. Her cheeks bulging out and her eyes crossed as she did her best not to burst out laughing at the absurdity of it all. Luna, all jokes aside, you have spent the equivalent of 10 times my original lifespan locked away in isolation for what you did. You have been judged by the elements of harmony and found worthy of a second chance. It's time to let go of your guilt and self-loathing and seize that chance. I told her sincerely. After a long moment of uncomfortable silence, Celestia cleared her throat. It seems we got a bit sidetracked. This way, please, she said before we resumed walking. Luna was silent the rest of the way, seemingly lost in thought if her contemplating expression was any indication. It didn't take long before we reached a set of double doors that led into a rather cozy study. It even had a fireplace. There were 2 sets of comfy chairs and a couch. There was a desk at the far side and the walls were lined with bookshelves. I bet Twilight would love holing up in here with all these books. Celestia gestured to one of the chairs and I took an awkward seat. Having the lower body of a pony made sitting a strange experience. It's actually more like lying down. I guess this explains the more ancient Roman and Greek designs of the furniture. It's much easier for a pony to sit or lie on. I must admit I am surprised you believed me, just like that. I said. I have lived a long time, Aaron. You learn to discern truth from lies when you have been around as long as me. It also helps that I once wielded the element of honesty. Its power lets one detect any lie no matter how well told. Some of that power still lingers in me, even though I can no longer wield the elements. That's interesting. I guess some of the power rubs off on the wearer. Or perhaps it merely enhances what is already there. Yet another thing to mull over later. Perhaps I could ask the Tree of Harmony directly? It did speak to me that first time. Then again, perhaps I better leave it alone. Magic as powerful and old as that is probably best left undisturbed as much as possible. Before we continue, would you like something to eat or drink? Celestia asked. Just water would be fine, I guess, since it's unlikely you have any parasprites around here. What, pray tell, would thou need parasprites for? Luna asked with a puzzled expression. Well, they make for good sources of nutrition and energy, and they taste good. At least to me. So you were a carnivorous creature then? Celestia stated matter-of-factly. Before being turned into, this, I mean. She waved a hoof at my form. Your rampage through Ponyville and the Everfree pretty much showed beyond doubt that your current form eats meat. Actually, I can survive on water and nutrients from the soil as well as pure sunlight alone. I also seem to absorb energy from magic, to a degree. But it's not very efficient. This body expends a great deal of the energy I absorb from the sun almost immediately in order to sustain itself, and when the sun goes down I become lethargic and fall into a sleep-like state, leaving me vulnerable. By consuming biological matter, such as parasprites, I can create stores of energy for use at a later time. It allows me to function even at night. I discovered I could eat them purely by chance and I chose to feed on parasprites almost exclusively since then. They are abundant in the everfree, the wildlife, and some carnivorous flora eat them and keep their numbers in check lest they'd become a plague and spread beyond the boundaries of the woods. And it does not disturb you to eat the flesh of another being. My original species are omnivores, princess, so eating meat is not new to me, though the manner in which it is consumed took a little getting used to. What sort of species do you originally hail from then? We call ourselves humans. My species, or should I say former species, are mammals belonging to the order of primates. The scientific name would be Homo sapiens sapiens. Our average lifespan is somewhere around 75 years, give or take, for most people. The oldest confirmed recorded age for a human was 122 years old. Which is rather exceptional. Such short lives, even our ponies live much longer than that. It seems almost cruelly short. Celestia said, her eyes showing a hint of sadness. How long does the average pony live then, princess? Most of our little ponies live up to an average of 250 years. Though there have been individuals who have reached 300, Starswirl the bearded for example lived to the ripe old age of 320. She said with a nostalgic smile that was halfway between joyful and sad. No doubt remembering all the times she shared with the old pony mage. And damn, that's a long time, but I guess that does explain how Granny Smith is still around if she was present during the founding of Ponyville. So thou art from a race of monkeys? Luna interjected. Actually we're descended from apes, well, depending on who you ask. Some do not believe this to be so for religious reasons. But I have never had much use for religion. Frankly, I believe adherence to a religious doctrine hinders progress and growth, both scientifically, personally and as a species as a whole, and causes more harm than good in the end. Terrible wars have been fought and the darkest of deeds have been done in the name of faith. I said with heaviness in my voice. Thy species sounds like a dangerous and violent one. Sometimes. It is true that humans have a darker side to them and that humanity has fought some of the most terrible wars to ever occur on our world, but we have also created great works of art and music, invented mathematics, and sought to understand the world around us through science. We have explored virtually every corner of our world, and even traveled to our moon. We may be more violent than you ponies, but overall we strive to do what is good and right, and to live our lives in peace. Wait, thou hast been to thine world's moon? Luna exclaimed, her eyes wide. How? Humans have built great machines capable of escaping the planet's gravitational pull. I only understand the very basics of how they work, so please don't ask me to explain. I really didn't want to try and explain the concept of spaceships, rocket engines, and every other complicated part involved with space travel. Thou must possess great magics to build such devices. She said, her voice full of wonder. Actually, in my world there is no such thing as magic, except in works of fiction. Both alicorns stared at me with open mouths. Ludicrous, how does a world with no magic even function? Luna muttered to herself, pacing around the room. Celestia for her part sat silently, apparently deep in her own thoughts. The longer the silence dragged on, the more fidgety I felt. Part of me still couldn't believe I was having a casual conversation with two alicorns. But hey, it was infinitely preferable to being back in that tube, or in a dungeon, or turned to stone. Even if the conversation got a little awkward or complicated at times. So what do humans look like? Celestia eventually asked after long minutes of silence, broken only by Luna's muttering. I could show you, for the most part anyway. Just give me a moment. I said, standing up. The two guards still present tensed up, but Celestia waved a hoof unconcernedly, telling them to stand down. I gathered some magic, actually leeching some from Celestia's aura since I was still feeling a bit drained after my escape from the null fluid. I then reshaped my body into that of an average human, or as close to it as I could mimic anyway. 10 fingers and toes made of wood, vines to mimic the flow and curve of muscles. I almost looked like a green version of one of those anatomy pictures you see in medical books. I then covered it all in a paper-thin layer of light-colored sapwood to serve as the skin. The only exception being my face, which remained the same featureless wooden mask. I was now tall enough to look Celestia in the eyes while standing. Sorry, I don't know how to do a proper human face yet. This is as close as I can mimic my old form, I said as I slowly turned around in a circle. The 2 princesses looked me over from head to toe with studious expressions on their faces. Thou said thy species was omnivorous, but this form seems to lack claws or anything else to hunt with. It's true that humans lack natural weapons like most predators, but that's why our ancestors mastered the use of tools such as spears and later bows to hunt with. Ancient humans were persistence hunters. Since humans were slower than their prey, they used a combination of running, walking and tracking to pursue their prey until said prey collapsed from exhaustion. Humans are nothing if not tenacious, I said as I reverted back to the centaur form. They almost sound like the griffins. I mulled that over in my head for a moment. I guess we may share a few character traits. So I don't have to worry about you eating any of my ponies? Celestia asked me after a moment's pause, a serious expression dominating her face. I thought I already said I didn't want to hurt any pony. I may hail from a race of omnivorous hunters, and my current form requires the occasional intake of meat to function optimally, but I won't eat another sentient being. Thou ate the dragon? Luna deadpanned. No, princess, the beast did. Ah yes, the beast. Should I worry about it breaking free and going on a rampage again? Celestia said. Not according to what my friend Zecora told me. The only reason the beast got out that first time was because I was unaware of its presence and it caught me by surprise. Now that I know it is there, I can keep it under control. I hope that is true. So do I, princess. Was the thought I left unspoken. I really hope Zecora was right and that the beast won't ever get loose again. Both for my sake and that of Equestria. I must ask, why did thou assume thy current form rather than thy human one? Luna said as she sat down again. Well, I had hoped it would put the ponies more at ease since it's closer to an equine form, and it is convenient for me. I assumed a pony form back when I was in Ponyville with Zecora, but unlike a real pony I cannot grasp things with my hooves. I'm guessing because I lack whatever innate magic allows your kind to manipulate things with hooves. So having a centaur body allows me to use my arms to grasp things. Basically it's the best of both worlds. But how did thou know what form to take? There are no centaur in Equestria. In fact, the only known centaur is a prisoner in Tartarus. There exists many a myth and legend in my world, Princess Luna. Our mythology describes many a creature that, while they don't exist in my world, do exist here in Equestria. Centaur among them. Other examples include hydras, manticores, and even unicorns and pegasi. In fact, most of Equestria's population is made up of creatures my kind has only encountered in fairy tales and works of fantasy. Hast thou tried taking on other forms? What about a Pegasus? Can thou fly? I haven't tried, but I doubt I could fly. Lacking the magic of a Pegasus. Even if I could fly, I doubt I would do it often, if at all. I have a fear of heights. A shame, flying can be a very relaxing experience. I shall take your word for it, Princess Luna. Perhaps you can experiment with it at a later time. Celestia suggested. It would be a good way to explore the limits of your abilities after all. We lapsed into silence for a bit while a maid came by with a food cart. It contained water for me and some tea and cake for Celestia. Luna apparently preferred pie instead of cake. That is the one thing I miss most. What's that? Both princesses asked at the same time. The taste of other food. I can't eat cake or pie in this form. And fruit has no real taste. It's like eating wax, I said while sticking my hand into the mug of water and absorbing it directly. Mine sister would find that a terrible fate indeed, considering she loves her cake so. Luna deadpanned, causing Celestia to blush lightly. I wonder if eating fruit makes me a cannibal, being a tree and all. I chuckled. The thought was ridiculous, of course. Pardon our curiosity, but what do parasprites taste like? Luna asked suddenly. Skittles. What are these, Skittles thou speak'st of? Small fruit-flavored candies from my world. Luna seemed lost in thought for a moment, a strange glint in her eyes. Sister, you weren't planning on trying to eat a parasprite, were you? Celestia said as she eyed Luna. And no, of course not, sister. What gave thou such a notion? Good. There was a short pause before Celestia said, because they taste terrible. I swear I heard the sound of a record scratching to a halt. We all stared at Celestia for a moment before she burst out laughing. You are all too easy to fool, she said between fits of laughter. The two guards just chuckled nervously. Luna stuck her nose in the air. Thy sense of humor is still terrible, sister, she said indignantly, but the effect was diminished by the smirk tugging at the corners of her mouth. As for me, I was quietly snickering because I just know that somewhere out there in the universe there is a fan of the show currently drawing Luna with a parasprite in her mouth. And I bet it's either cute or hilarious, or both. After consuming our snacks, Celestia resumed the conversation. Something occurred to me, she said as she put her now empty plate down. What's that, princess? You said you came from another dimension, yet you seem to know a great deal about our world for someone who has never been here. You recognized the mare in the moon, and even spoke of the elements of harmony earlier. How is it that you know these things? Oh crap! I didn't think about that. Well, I faltered. So was your story about being from another world nothing but an elaborately crafted lie after all then? Well, I told them this much, may as well tell them the rest and see what happens. I can explain how I knew these things, but I request that you send your guards away first, princess. Thou would not be planning anything nefarious now, would thee? Said Luna as she eyed me suspiciously. No, nothing nefarious like that, princess, but I feel certain that once you hear my explanation you would rather not have word of it spreading. Some ponies might not take it well. After a minute or so Celestia nodded and motioned to the guards to dismiss them. They left the room reluctantly, obviously not pleased with leaving them alone with me. All right then, let's hear this explanation of yours. What I am about to say will sound absolutely crazy, but I swear upon the tree of harmony that it is the truth. That statement raised a few eyebrows. The short version is this. In my world, Equestria and all its people are all part of a work of fiction for the entertainment of children. Luna glared at me. That is the most ludicrous thing we have heard in eons. And we have met discord, so that's saying a lot. It is the truth, princess. There is actually a theory behind it. Please elaborate then. Celestia said, her tone strangely neutral. Pardon me if it doesn't make complete sense, I've never had to summarize it before. Basically it's like this, there exists a theory that there are an infinite number of alternate parallel universes besides our own. Some so radically different as to be utterly alien and incomprehensible, others so similar you could spend an eternity looking for a difference. These parallel universes are created by the choices we make. An infinite number of choices. For example, in one universe you chose to eat cake, in another you chose to eat pie instead. Each choice creates an alternate world, one for choice A and one for choice B. You follow me so far? A pair of nods answered me. Now some people have speculated that whenever someone writes a piece of fiction this also results in the birth of another alternate universe. One where that fiction is actually reality. Others suggested that the idea of such fiction is actually that alternate universe somehow bleeding through the fabric that separates realities, and into the thoughts of an individual as a sort of universe-spanning psychic beacon. Then that individual creates his fiction based on the knowledge that bleeds through into their subconscious mind. In an infinite number of realities, what is fiction in one, is reality in another. Thus all fiction is reality somewhere and all reality is fiction. I hope I didn't break them. They were staring at me with the strangest expressions. This cannot be so. This flies in the face of everything we have ever believed about the cosmos. It cannot be real. Luna finally stated. The fact that I am standing here talking to two beings who in my world are but beloved fictional characters would suggest otherwise. We are beloved. Luna said with surprise in her voice. More than you can know, princess. You may not be able to ever meet them, but in my world there are hundreds of thousands of people who love and admire you. Both children and adults alike. Oh dear, I think she's about to cry. Her eyes were getting a bit misty even as a small smile tugged at her lips. That does bring up the question of how you were brought here. Celestia mused out loud. I don't know, princess. One minute I was on my way home, the next thing I know I'm blinded by a brilliant light as if I looked into a lightning bolt at point blank. And when I finally regained my vision I was here. Whoever or whatever was behind it is a mystery to me. Heck, I doubt it was even intentional. Perhaps I was merely collateral damage. Whatever fate has in store for me, she picked one heck of a doozy to drop on me, that's for sure. To bring us back to your explanation, I see why you would not want other ponies to know, some would indeed not take this too well. But it does make me wonder, if what you said is true, then what else do you know of our world? What has this, fiction, shown you? Celestia asked. She seemed awfully calm for someone who was just told she's nothing but a fictional character in a make-believe universe. At least from where I stand. I guess I can chalk it up to her millennia of experience. Too much and yet nothing. I answered. That is a rather vague answer, care to elaborate on that? I know a lot of things, like the names of certain ponies, locations across Equestria, other characters who pop up in the stories from time to time, some of the villains too. I know of some of the immutable facts, like the elements and tree of harmony, but before you ask, I know nothing of the future. That is to say, I know of what might possibly happen, but my very presence here in this reality has altered events irreparably already. I refilled my mug with water and then dipped my fingers in, letting a few drops fall back down into the mug, causing a ripple. By being transported here at this point in time, I've caused things to change. The effects of those changes will ripple outwards and spread, causing subtle and not so subtle alterations to the existing timeline. Some events will still happen according to the original timeline as depicted in the stories, while others will be radically altered. This pretty much renders any information I have useless. And before you ask, no, princess, I will not divulge the original information to you. Doing so would only be detrimental because you would try to use it to prevent things that, while unpleasant, need to happen. Celestia seemed disappointed for a moment before she spoke up. I can see the wisdom in your words, but I would beg of you just one answer. Regarding Twilight, I presume. Yes. She said quietly, her eyes looked so tired and longing for a moment, it was a strange emotion to see on the normally unflappable alicorn. Let me ask you this, princess. Has she ever failed you? Celestia shook her head. Then that should tell you all you need to know. She frowned at first at my non-answer, but then she broke into the happiest smile I've seen yet. It was at that moment a scroll appeared in a puff of smoke. Well, speak of the devil. I said. Beg thy pardon. Luna said as she gave me a quizzical look. Just an expression from my world, princess. It is used when an object of discussion unexpectedly becomes present during the conversation. It can also be used about a topic that quickly becomes relevant. Your sister's student in this case. Celestia nodded as she used her magic to levitate and unroll the scroll. Her eyes moved rapidly as she read it. It would seem the little fillies you spoke of confirm your story. One of them in particular seems eager to see you again. That would likely be Apple Bloom. Before everything went wrong, I did promise to meet with her and her friends. I had hoped that by earning their trust I could make some inroads with the rest of Ponyville, both for myself and Zecora. I just wish things hadn't gone so disastrously wrong. We were interrupted by a sudden knock at the door, which then swung open before either princess could respond. In stepped a certain white unicorn with a long blonde mane. "Pardon the intrusion, Aunt Celestia, but I must speak with you at once." "Blue blood, my nephew, can't it wait? I am entertaining a guest." "My apologies, Auntie, but it is exactly because of Sir Aaron that I am here." Celestia motioned for him to go on. "The nobles believe you are being too soft, Auntie," Blue blood continued. "After you ended the Sun Court, I lingered behind and overheard a conversation between several members of the greater noble houses. They will not stomach a, and I quote, dangerous manipulative monster, to roam free. They plan to go behind your back and use their influence to put Sir Aaron on trial before the Tribunal of the Tribes. How do these fools believe they can go behind the backs of their princess?" Luna snorted angrily. "Apparently through some legal loophole, Auntie Luna. I fear I do not have all the details. Had I lingered any longer they might have seen me. I figured it best to warn you all of what they were planning." "What exactly is this Tribunal of the Tribes?" I asked. "It is trio of judges, one from each tribe, Unicorn, Earth Pony, and Pegasi. The tribunal was instituted after the unification of the three tribes to dispense fair judgment and justice. While they are seldom called upon in modern times, as most disputes are settled in the Sun Court, the tribunal does predate Luna and myself taking the throne. I could technically overrule them, but that would cause a lot of friction with the nobility," Celestia said. "And it's never a good thing to piss off the ponies who help run the day-to-day operations of the country, am I right?" She gave me an apologetic look. "They would decry it as an abuse of my authority and an obstruction of what they believe to be justice." Luna muttered something extremely unflattering under her breath about politics and the nobility in general after hearing that. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, nephew," Celestia told Blue blood. "It was the least I could do, Auntie. At least now you can prepare for their plans. I shall keep my ears open among the nobility. Should I learn of anything else I will inform you at once." Blue blood answered sincerely before he turned to me. "If you require legal counsel, I know of a skilled individual who represents members of non-pony species a lot, Sir Aaron. For once I'm glad my face has no expression, because if it did I would probably look completely flabbergasted." Blue blood was not at all what I expected. I expected a haughty, blustering buffoon, but he was courteous, kind, and downright pleasant. I mentally shook myself and answered him. "That would be most appreciated, since my knowledge of the equestrian legal system is non-existent. Thank you, Prince Blueblood. I will be in your debt." "Think nothing of it, I will have him contacted at once. Please excuse me." And with that he trotted out of the room. Luna scowled at the closing door. "It seems the rabble are being rebellious. You give them way too much leeway, sister. Times have changed, Luna. I can't simply overrule everything I don't like or disagree with. But I am rather surprised they would go this far. I wonder what reason they could possibly have for this." "You think there's more behind this than a xenophobic knee-jerk reaction?" I asked Celestia as she poured more tea for Luna and herself. "While I must admit that our little ponies can indeed be rather xenophobic at times, it seems like a rather extreme reaction. I wouldn't be so sure after what happened in Ponyville." "Oh? Do elaborate, please." I told her of what happened with Zecora and the town's general reaction to her. Celestia seemed disappointed. "It seems I have been sheltering my little ponies a skosh too much." More like a lot of skoshies, Fluttershy's voice rang out in my mind. "Speaking of Ponyville, while I was detained, I overheard a conversation between your student and her friends. They said that several ponies had been injured, some severely. I was wondering if there was anything I could do to help, or at least make reparations of some kind. And if at all possible I would like to find out how Zecora is doing." Celestia nodded. "While I cannot think of anything you can do at the moment, the least I can do is inquire after your friend." Thank you, princess. There was another knock on the door, this time whoever it was waited until the princess bade them to enter. A Pegasus pony who looked as if he walked straight out of a Men in Black cosplay convention entered, carrying a scroll under his wing. Beg your pardon, your highness, but I have a message for you. A message? From whom? Celestia asked, surprised, clearly not expecting any messages at this hour. This came from Operative Sweetie Drop's highness. Marked for your eyes only. Bonbon? I wonder what that's all about? Field report maybe? She was part of a monster hunting unit after all. Thank you, Nightwing, you may go. Highness. The pony saluted and marched out the door. Celestia unrolled the scroll and began to read it. The more she read, the further her expression fell. What is it, sister? Thou seem troubled, and who is this Sweetie Drops? Said Luna. She is a pony who used to work for me some time ago. She just broke half a dozen rules using official communication channels meant only for very specific messages to send a personal letter begging for my help because her mare friend is dying, and the doctors say they can't help her. Their magic apparently doesn't work on whatever is afflicting her, and so she's written this desperate plea for me to save her mare friend's life, knowing that she could end up in a heap of trouble for doing so. Realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. Wait, you are talking about Lyra. She was one of the ponies injured when... Yes, when you rampaged through Ponyville. Celestia said harshly before she sighed, I'm sorry Aaron, I didn't mean it like that. I don't know if I can help this pony, this Lyra. If the best doctors in Canterlot can't save her, then there may be little that even my magic can do for her. We may not be able to assist in this matter, my sister, but perhaps Aaron can. Luna said suddenly, causing both Celestia and me to look at her. Think about it, sister. If it was his powers, his magics, that caused the damage, perhaps they can undo them. That might be possible. Celestia mused. Magic does seem to operate by its own set of rules after all. Perhaps this approach might work. It seems there might be a way for you to make amends after all, Aaron. If you feel you are up to the task. I nodded. I will do whatever it takes to help her and make it right. And if I can't help her then at least I want to beg her forgiveness, before it's too late. With little else to discuss at the time and no further interruptions, Celestia called for a guard escort and we made our way over to the Canterlot Hospital with all due haste. To say that the mood of the group was subdued as we traveled the streets of Canterlot was an understatement. I for one certainly felt uneasy about all this. I just wanted to help make it right, but I dreaded the possibility that I might be unable to do anything. And if that were the case, then Lyra would soon be dead. I shook my head. Best not dwell on the negative. To make sure I had enough magical power to do whatever I would end up trying to do, I leached as much energy off of Celestia and Luna's auras as I could. I just hoped it would be enough. We eventually reached the hospital and made our way over to the intensive care unit. The closer we got, the more nervous I felt. As we passed through the doors separating the ICU from the rest of the hospital, we spotted Bonbon in the hallway next to the room where they were keeping Lyra. She was pacing up and down nervously and looked incredibly haggard. When she spotted our group, her eyes went wide as saucers. I guess she didn't expect both Celestia and Luna, along with a contingent of guards, to appear. Princess Celestia, I know ISH shouldn't have sent the letter that way, but she stammered, eyeing the guards nervously before Celestia cut her off. It's all right, my little pony, you're not in trouble. While I can't say I'm pleased that you broke the rules, I more than understand why you did it. Bonbon threw herself at Celestia's feet, or should I say hooves. Please princess, you have to help her. I don't know what else to do. She pleaded on the verge of tears. Celestia draped a wing over her back, shushing her gently. That's why we are here, we'll do what we can. Though, I cannot promise anything, I will try to make it right. I said quietly. Bonbon looked up, noticing me for the first time. What are? A spark of recognition flashed across her eyes as she seemed to realize who, or rather what I was. You did this to her. I'm sorry about what happened, and I will do what I can to try and make it right. I never meant for her to get hurt, for any pony to get hurt. It was. Her hoof connected with my face. She had moved so fast I didn't even notice. Everyone stood frozen for a moment. It didn't hurt me, but it did break some of the twigs and branches that made up the inside of my jaw and cracked the mask that served as my face. The cracks spider webbing from the point of impact on my cheek, all the way up to where my eyebrow would be. She raised another hoof to strike me. The guards moved to try and stop her, but I held out my arm to block their path, and waited, but the second blow never came. Tears were leaking from her eyes, leaving dark streaks in the fur of her face. If she dies, Celestia, be my witness, I will find a way to kill you, if it's the last thing I do. She snarled through clenched teeth whilst fighting to keep her voice steady. I looked her in the eyes and gave a slight nod. I believe you. Having said her piece, Bonbon stepped aside and allowed us to proceed inside. I mended the cracks in my face mask as I entered the room. Bonbon striking me had been unexpected, but then if I had been in her shoes, or horseshoes as the case may be, I would probably have done the same. Grief can make people react extremely. I guess the same holds true for ponies. I shook myself from my thoughts and focused on the occupants of the room. Lyra was lying in the sole bed in the room, hooked up to various monitors to keep a close eye on her condition. A doctor and nurse were tending to her. She looked pale and her mane was clinging to her forehead with sweat. She was struggling so hard to breathe, fighting for every precious gulp of air. As we entered the room, her eyes locked onto me with undisguised fear. "It's okay, my little pony," said Celestia as she stepped up beside me. "He is here to try and help. I don't want to die. Please, I don't want to die." She managed to gurgle out before coughing wetly. When her hoof came away from her mouth, I could clearly see little specks of blood on her fur. Oh dear God, she's drowning in her own blood. This was a mistake, it's stressing the patient. The doctor began to argue. Before he could finish his argument and call for our removal from the room, I steeled my resolve and I rushed over to Lyra's side. She trembled as I gently placed a hand on her barrel. "You won't," I told her with every ounce of conviction I possessed, keeping my voice as gentle as I could. "I won't let you die, Lyra. Please, let me help you." Our eyes met, flecked golden yellow, staring into the green orbs of my featureless mask. I saw so much fear in them, but also a spark of hope. Finally she gave a small nod. The rest of the room let out a collective breath of relief. I gently placed both hands on her barrel and let my magic flow out. I meant what I said. I would do anything and everything in my power to see her through this. It did not take long to find what I was looking for. I could sense them inside of her. The spores the beast had unleashed had clung to the inside of her lungs and began to grow into mold. The mold was slowly covering every inch of her lungs, blocking her alveoli and causing hemorrhaging. I frowned, well, mentally at least. No wonder they were having trouble healing her. The mold radiated low-intensity field of malicious magic that had foiled all attempts to heal her through both magical and conventional means. Truly disgustingly diabolical. However, though the beast may have infused these spores with its own dark magic, they ultimately came from me. So I could do something about them. I tried to channel my power into them, but the magic seemingly dissolved before it could reach deep enough inside her. I tried it again, pouring more power into it this time, but to no avail. The energy simply seemed to fizzle and disperse before it reached her lungs. I would have snarled in frustration, but I didn't want to spook the poor thing any further than she already was. Then an idea hit me. "Lyra, I'm going to need you to trust me. What I'm about to do won't feel very pleasant, but you must not struggle or fight me. I promise, when it's over you will be all right." Her eyes told me she wasn't completely convinced, but with no other option but certain death she nodded once more in acquiescence. "Good, now open your mouth and hold very still. I gently placed a hand on her cheek as she complied with my request. I let my magic flow outwards and a vine sprouted from my hand, snaking its way into her mouth, down her throat and into her trachea where it split and proceeded into her lungs. I kept the vines as thin as possible to spare her any discomfort, but the sensation of something snaking its way down your throat is incredibly unpleasant no matter how small it is. And when you enter the lungs, the body's natural reflex is to try and expel the foreign object immediately. The second my vine entered her lungs, her eyes shot wide and she began to cough and make noises of protest. "Shhh, keep calm Lyra, this won't take a minute. You're doing fine, just try to breathe normally," I said to her, keeping my voice as calm as possible. Now before you wonder why I put her through such an unpleasant ordeal, it's because it was the only way to remove the spores and mold. I could not influence them from the outside through magic alone. I needed direct physical contact, and this was the only way to get them from the inside, short of performing actual surgery on her. That's not something I want to see up close. The second I made contact with the mold and spores, I blasted them with a burst of my magic. Essentially what I did with that was overriding the dark magic that was controlling them and subjugating them to my will. And no, these things are not sentient nor sapient, but they did operate on a rudimentary level, much like a virus, following a preset line of commands. Grow and consume, which they did until I countermanded it with a new directive. My command was simple: wither and die. And so they did, and with the malicious magic now gone, it allowed me to reabsorb them as nutrients. I did it as gently as I could, but I cannot imagine that the sensation of mold being pulled from the inside of your lungs is a pleasant one, so it was no surprise that Lyra began to struggle and push against me. "You're hurting her. Stop!" Bon Bon yelled beside me. "It's almost over. Please, for her sake let me finish," I said calmly but firmly. Bon Bon looked ready to lunge at me, but was held back by Celestia gently placing a wing on her withers. As I absorbed the last of the spores, I began to focus on my magic once again, telling it what I wanted it to do. Twilight could probably describe it ad nauseam in great technical detail, what spell matrix was used and how much arcana this and mana that, but I'm neither a trained mage nor a scholar, so suffice to say I used my magic to power boost Lyra's body by temporarily bestowing her with a portion of my own regenerative properties, putting her cells into overdrive for a moment to stop the hemorrhaging and allow her alveoli to regenerate. Now I could claim it was all a brilliant stroke of genius on my part and that all this went according to a brilliant plan I devised earlier, but that would be a lie. I was working purely on instinct and intent, hoping for the best result. A story I once read said that 99% of wielding magic is all about intent. And the rest is just fancy words. Well, my intent was to heal her, and my magic responded on its own. I honestly wasn't sure if I could, but I figured that since my magic is nature-based, it should be able to give life or heal, as much as it can bring harm. Nature is all about balance between life and death after all. I'm just glad it worked. My task complete, I withdrew the vines as swiftly as was safely possible, allowing Lyra to take her first easy breath in days. She seemed stunned with surprise. I'm going to be okay now," she croaked. Her voice still a bit raw. The doctor cast a quick diagnostic spell, eyes widening in surprise. "I don't believe it. According to my spell, she's in perfect health when moments ago she was but hours away from death's doorstep." There was a cry of joy from behind me and a multicolored blur sped past me to wrap Lyra in a bone-crushing hug. Bon Bon was desperately clinging to her, crying tears of relief. Lyra nuzzled her mane and whispered something into her ears I couldn't hear. I turned to leave so the two of them could have some privacy when Lyra called out to me. "Wait." I turned to face her. "Thank you, for saving my life." "You do not have to thank me, Miss Heartstrings, I'm just glad you're all right. It was my fault you were hurt in the first place, and I am deeply sorry that happened to you. The last thing I ever wanted was for Eniponi to be harmed. Please believe me when I say I was not in control of my actions at the time, and I will do everything in my power to make sure this never happens to Eniponi again. She stared me in the eyes for a moment as if searching for something before she spoke up. Then, for what it's worth, I forgive you, she said, making Bon Bon look up in surprise. Lyra, he nearly killed you, how can you forgive him so easily? If what he says is true and he was not in control, then don't you think I should forgive him? Bon Bon humphed but didn't say anything. I guess it's going to take a lot longer for me to earn her forgiveness too. Right now I was just glad Lyra was alright and not holding a grudge. I don't think I could bear having her death on my conscience. As we left the room and walked towards the exit, Celestia leaned down and quietly spoke to me. You did a great thing tonight, Aaron. You have my gratitude. I shook my head, all I did was right a wrong that never should have been in the first place. But, I am glad that she's going to be okay. The mood as we walked back to the palace was much lighter, but it seemed the evening had one more nasty surprise in store for me. As we approached the gates, a second group of guards approached us and blocked our way. What is the meaning of this? Celestia demanded of the pony in the lead. Said pony looked incredibly uncomfortable. 1,000 pardons, Your Highness, but we have orders to take the creature into custody. On whose authority? Neither mine sister nor myself gave such orders. Luna boomed. Apologies, Princess Luna, the guard bowed deeply to her. We are acting under the authority of the Tribunal. Damn, those nobles certainly don't waste time. And when will the Tribunal take court? Celestia asked, her tone just a smidge above icy. In 2 days, Your Highness. We are to take the creature to the dungeons in the meantime to make sure it won't flee to escape justice. Luna was about to say something, but Celestia shook her head at her. Arguing about it in front of the castle for all to hear and see would help us none. It didn't stop Luna from giving the guards a death glare worthy of her Nightmare Moon alter ego though. The poor stallion looked like he was about to wet himself. Celestia turned to me with an apologetic look. I am sorry, Aaron, but I know, Princess, I said, cutting her off. It's all right. I'm sure this will all be cleared up in a few days and we will be able to laugh about it later. Celestia gave me a small smile. I will make sure of it. With those parting words, I let the guards take me into the palace and down to the dungeons. I swear I can't seem to catch a break. If I ever meet Lady Fate and her brother Murphy in person, I will deck them both in the schnoz with a cast iron skillet.